I'm gonna hope that people are. Hi, this is Alexander Russo from The Grade. It's Friday, it's February 21st, 2025, and we are just completing the end of a frantic first month of the Trump administration and its efforts to revamp everything. Everyone's gone through the wood chipper, including perhaps some of the journalists assembled here. I'm really glad to have them here to talk about the coverage that they've produced and what they've learned, and maybe to hear some war stories. And then also, I'm eager to glean any reflections about week one versus week four. Maybe we've all learned some things trying to keep up with the fire hose of information. So I'm going to have everyone introduce each other. We're going to talk for a little while, and then we're going to see if there are any questions, and if folks who are watching have questions, we'll try to answer them or comments. And then this will go up as a recording later today, and then folks will get to watch it and share it and learn from it. So first things first, Zach, would you take a second to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how long you've been covering DC-based education issues?
Sure. I'm Zach Monaghan with the New York Times. I've been covering the education department for just around a year, but coming in from a background in federal courts, which has been interesting now with some of the lawsuits coming down the pipe about student privacy issues and lawsuits against the department and things like that.
Excellent. Lexi, tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Lexi Cochran. I have been on the education beat for a year and a half now at the Hill. I'm the only one who is on this beat at my outlet, so I kind of cover all aspects of education. So I do national, I do some state, sometimes local if something becomes big.
Excellent. Mandy, tell us about yourself if people don't know you.
Sure, I'm Mandy McLaren. I'm an educational reporter for the Boston Globe. Fun fact, my very first print byline ever was in December 2016, and it was with Emma Brown at the Post, and it was a Trump school choice story looking in to starting his first administration. So it's been a trip to, come full circle, and here we are at it again. But I've been locally based, more regional newspapers, first at the Courier Journal in Kentucky and now at the Globe. So yeah, just a little bit of a different perspective of how we tackle what's happening in DC.
Right. You've gotten pulled into the DC death ray, haven't you?
Yeah, it
Um,
sucks you in.
it does. I wanted to start off by asking everyone to just to give us an overview of what it's been like going through and getting through this month, uh, generally or compared to other stories or other crises or events that you've worked on. Who wants to give an overview first? Zach, I'm going to volunteer you.
Okay. I mean, just in the short time that I've been doing this, it's sort of bit of a whirlwind. I mean, it's hard to overstate the difference between where we are now versus where we were a year ago, looking at, things like student debt, pretty straightforward, what would have been pretty traditional things for the department to be working on under the Biden administration. Yeah, I mean, just obviously, I think everyone expected there was going to be some upheaval for the department following this, but just I think coming to grips with the reorientation of, things like the Office of Civil Rights, the functions that they're serving now, as compared to, what they would have been doing for the last several decades is just, I mean, and speaking to the people that are in that office and have faced, faced punishment for some of the work they've done in the past. I mean, I think we've all looked into the whole, those folks that were put on administrative leave over DEI issues, and then speaking to the ones that are still left that are trying to figure out the road ahead and, you know, what they're supposed to be doing, what sort of enforcement actions they're going to be expected to take, and what priorities this administration has set for them to look into schools over. It's really a change. I mean, a bit of a 180 in some ways.
I can imagine. And just to help me get oriented, are you solo working on this? I don't know how big the Washington Bureau is or whether there are other people working on that topic with you.
No, it's I think we have the luxury of having a lot of different angles on it. I mean, I really just look at the department personally. But you know, we have a whole team of education reporters in New York and elsewhere that look into the fallout on schools across the country, higher ed, K through 12. You know, I think we have been able to kind of interrogate it from a lot of different angles.
Nice. Mandy, what's it been like for you seeing it and covering it from Boston?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's clearly a challenge is I'm not a DC reporter, so I don't have the contacts of probably that Lexi and Zach have. So, you know, wanting to be able to translate what's happening in DC for our Boston area readers, you know, it's been a lot of hitting the phones and trying to build those contacts pretty quickly. And luckily a lot of the folks I cover special ed a lot, so luckily a lot of folks in that community have been really great at helping me read the tea leaves, if you will. But it's also just been interesting in a newsroom of our size where we do have a DC bureau, but they're so swamped with everything else that's going on that myself and a couple other reporters based in Boston have been picking up a lot of the education developments just because there's, you know, it's just like the fire hose happening.
I can't imagine what scramble that must be because Washington is in some ways just a whole different world than state or local education.
Yeah, and then it's, you know, you're trying to think about, okay, what content can our readers get from anywhere versus what can we provide to them that is unique and that they can't get elsewhere. And so I think we're still trying to figure that out and how we can provide more tailored stories to the impact that all of these events happening in DC will have on families in our region.
And we're going to get to everyone's favorite, most useful highlight reels in just a second. Lexi, give us a sense of what it's been like for you. You've been at this for a little while, and I presume that you knew all the acronyms well before January.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I feel like it's been a lot of expected and unexpected. Going into this, I think there's a lot that happened over the past month that I kind of expected. You know, a lot more fast paced. Some of the issues that have come up, school choice, DEI, all these issues. I feel like that was all really expected, and I wasn't too shocked by that. I think the ways in which some of the stuff has come down though, or some of the stuff has developed, I think not threw me off guard a bit. I wasn't sure how the president of this administration was going to go about this. So I think it was a lot of like, okay, like we know, well, I know what issues he's probably going to focus on and what's going to come down, but then a lot of how it's, I think, developed and played out is at least unexpected to me. I wasn't around during the first Trump administration. I was still graduating high school at the time. So I was not so I don't really have a sense to compare it to then, but it's just, you know, from everything that was kind of told to me, I was like, okay, this pace, this like, you know, kind of whirlwind isn't a shock, but just I guess the way that he has decided to go about some of these issues, I think has thrown me off guard a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a lot, and it has been very different than the first time around, and we'll talk about that as well. the Heckinger folks did a nice timeline of announcements and proclamations by week, which I recommend everyone. And then Oregon Public Broadcasting also did a tally. I think they announced, I think they said 20 major announcements, 20 major decrees or changes in just a month. I don't know if anyone was predicting that it was going to go as quickly as it has, at least I was surprised by that. Let's talk about successes. You all have worked on this issue, and I really appreciate the coverage that you've done. I'd love for you to describe what you think has been your best or most successful story or bit of reporting or decision, anything that you've done that you feel good about in terms of the coverage that you provided or the uniqueness or the information that you were sharing out. Who wants to go first with successes? Don't make me pick Zach again.
Go first. I think my successes. There's a couple stories that I'm pretty proud of that I like that I have one up. But the one that I shared with you before this was one about democratic messaging around education, and I really like that one just because I feel like it's a pretty important one right now. I feel like we're in this time where there's a lot of news around education on the Republican side, which is expected in some ways because they're in control of government. But it seemed a little to me that Democrats didn't really have this clear messaging out on kind of what they're going to do, what kind of their next steps are beyond, the statements I saw of, oh, this thing that Trump announced is bad, this thing that they announced is bad. And I mean, I just wasn't seeing any clear, like, okay, well, what policies are we going to put out? Like, what's our next step in this now that now that Trump is really going hard at this issue? So I did a story on that, and I thought that was kind of my most interesting and useful one because I know there are some people who are just like, what's next for Democrats on this issue? Like, how are they going to move forward with it, with everything going on? So I really like that story.
I agree. I'm sure some of the other people watching would agree. I had seen a bunch of stories about the lack of a democratic response or agenda in general that had mentioned education, but yours was the first piece that I saw that pointed out that the Democrats haven't come up with a coherent plan other than, like you said, saying this is bad or we hate this, or being in opposition, or going down to the U.S. Department of Education and trying to get in a couple Fridays ago, which was hilarious, crazy pants stuff. Okay, favorite, best, or best received stories. Mandy, Zach, you want a horse and goggle? We used to horse and goggle back in the day.
I can go. I'm not sure. I think I have just been trying to, I guess I used to, be a Gannett person. And so they called them know the score stories. So the sort of news you can use stories for your reader. So what can I peel off relatively quickly? And again, it's like translating what's happening in DC for an average Boston area reader. So stories that I've done have been sort of explaining the implications of the school choice executive order on Title I and special education funding. Takeaways from Linda McMahon's confirmation hearing, sort of what you missed if you weren't able to tune in. And then one story that I think is done better than we expected is just what is the education department and what is its main functions. So yeah, and I think it's just, again, it's a complicated dynamic. I'm sure like other journalists watching this, like there are only so many national jobs, so many DC based jobs. So I think a lot of folks out there are like in my position, and you're trying to keep up with what's happening in DC, but at the same time, like I've got a Brookline school committee, budget crisis over here, and I've got all these other local stories that are not going away. So as far as like being able to have deep sourcing and analysis right now on DC issues, not necessarily where I'm going to be able to be the one doing that. So I think for other like local and regional journalists interested in stepping into what's happening with the Trump administration, it's sort of looking for those quick turn pieces you can do.
What while we're on the topic of local coverage and local impact, what local impacts or what reality other than theater and far off DC talking heads, what local impact or reality have you been able to find and see and share with people so far?
Still working on that, but I think one thing that is really ripe for looking into is obviously what's been happening with OCR. Massachusetts families are very active in filing complaints with OCR, and actually a string of those complaints kind of culminated in a federal OSEP investigation of the state special ed system here, and that report was finalized under the Biden administration, I think January 16th. And we were expecting it to come out, and we like me and all the advocates were refreshing the federal website every day, and it never was showing up. And so we thought maybe this is a casualty of the changeover. But eventually it came out under the Trump administration. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think, you
No,
know,
no, I'm
looking
sorry to interrupt, but
into, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's really a really helpful point of contact because Massachusetts isn't the only place that has these special ed OCR cases, and that's a much more, it's less abstract perhaps than some of the other executive orders or dear colleague letters.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm super curious. I'm not in a school choice state, right? Um, if for somebody who's reporting in the context of where there is already a state ESA program, just sort of taking a look at if, Project 2025 does come to fruition, and, the Trump administration is able to work with Congress to change how, Title I and IDEA are administered, what that could look like. So how much actual dollars would that equal for like a federal component of an ESA program in your state?
Right. You're not, they haven't gotten to the point yet where they're talking about voucherizing Title I, but this would be an add-on to Title I that they're talking about?
I mean, it depends. I think the goal is to change them from formula grants to block grants, which would give states more flexibility in how they direct those funds. And I think the push is for states to then allocate them directly to ESAs rather than to school districts.
Right. So that's something that hasn't happened yet, but could happen and would be a
Yeah.
very big deal financially. Okay, let's get back to that. Zach, pat yourself on the back if you don't mind, or praise someone else's coverage. What's the best thing you've been involved with or seen someone else do?
Well, I was just thinking, listening to Lexi and Andy, just like the standards by which I've tried to judge myself are just like, where can we add value besides the just drumbeat of news and stuff and stories like that, like the local impact, the pushback from Democrats, stuff like that. I mean, I think that's the kind of focus that you need to have on these things. And I feel personally kind of just cloistered in the DC beltway that you're talking about. But within that, I've been trying to look as closely as I can about sort of the changes in the department that are happening. Some driven by Elon Musk and Doge, things like that, trying to just sort of get any kind of clarity that we can from anywhere, whether that's through like legal filings in these lawsuits where some of the Doge people have self-identified as, point people in the department, just trying to figure out who they are and what their goals are. I had a story last week with Dana Goldstein here where we sort of looked into the there was a proposal that we had heard was floating around to sort of replace some of the public facing tools that the department has had for things like the FAFSA with AI tools that folks associated with Elon Musk maybe helping build in the future, and how things like that are going to play out. So yeah, I mean, there's the atmosphere of uncertainty surrounding
Right.
what's happening in the department, and who is actually driving these changes, like whether these are ideas that originated from Trump's appointees that are leading the department now, or whether these are being passed down from the Doge team or from outside activists that are just like lobbying for changes, pushing Doge to implement stuff like that. All those things are just like any kind of tidbits that we can get out about, what's actually happening inside the room is something that I've really tried to look into.
Say a little bit more about that. What's the best quote or fact or name that you've been able to dig out that people really seem to appreciate? Because, like you said, there's so much uncertainty. Any verified, accurate information you can add is valuable. Is there anything that stands out to you as like a good bit that you got?
Well, in that story, which really shout out to Dana because she did so much of the work on that. But I mean, we were able to see how there's a few Doge folks on the team now. One is Adam Ramada, who has declared himself as the sort of education guy in court filings recently. Another
Okay.
is Brooks Morgan, and it's just it's whether inadvertently or intentionally. I mean, there's just sort of a culture of secrecy surrounding this. I mean, we don't know a whole lot about why these particular folks were detailed to the department. We don't know if they have sort of free reign to
Mhm.
pursue the projects that they're interested in, or if they take their marching orders from someone higher up. Um,
That's fascinating. That's fascinating about the names. I hadn't seen or heard those names before, and for the last couple of weeks, I've been asking around in a very lackluster, lazy way. Who's the Doge education guy or gal? And I had the feeling from Occupy Wall Street or other social justice movements where they have no leader. There's no leader, so you don't know who's responsible. So it's very helpful to have some names to attach to. I know ProPublica has been trying to do a sort of a leaderboard
really good work by them, yeah.
of folks. I don't know if they've got Adam or Brooks yet, so I think you might have been first to that.
I don't know. I think I mean Adam really just that was one name that just came out through some of these lawsuits. I mean, several groups have sued the department saying, we have students, we have teachers that are concerned about their privacy. Some of them have applied for student loans, some of them have applied for, public service loan forgiveness, programs like that. They're worried about their data being housed there. And we'd like to know who's handling this data. And Adam files an affidavit in federal court saying, I'm the person that it was detailed to the department. I have a 6-person team, and I am here to audit the department's student loan databases. And you take that and you look deeper into that.
That's fascinating. Have you been able to, or has someone else done a profile or done a little write-up about him?
We haven't. I think the whole Doge operation is definitely something that lots of interest in, and I know a lot of my colleagues are digging
Yeah.
hard into now. Yeah.
Fascinating. Um, let's talk a little bit about, again, the grade is all about reflecting on the work. It's hard work. It has to be done at speed. The stakes are high. The demands for accuracy are high. But it's always helpful to look and think about things that you've learned or things that you might do differently or things that have just changed. I feel like the coverage has changed a little bit from week one to now. That people are making different story decisions and also covering the stories that they choose to cover a little bit differently. Are there any lessons or adjustments or full-on regrets, things that haven't been useful or effective, that you might share in this whirlwind month that we're looking back at? Is there anything that you wish you'd done differently, or you're going to do differently in the next month?
Well, I wonder if one of the issues that you're thinking about is ICE enforcement raids that didn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I know you've been outspoken about some of those stories. And
Sorry about
yeah,
that.
I think it's a difficult position to be in, because you want to report on the news and folks' reaction to the news, but you don't want your reporting to inflame the reaction, if that makes sense. So I think, a lot of education reporters across the country, right, had the charge to go out and report on how our schools responding to this possibility of schools no longer being a safe zone. And, regardless of what we as the sort of middlemen choose to do, like that message is hopping over us and going straight to those families. And so I think there is a responsibility to report on how they're reacting to it, whether or not there is actual evidence to stoke the fear, right? I think we're in just a climate of like so much happening all the time, and like the Trump administration following through on things that we at one point in time would have all thought was just like crazy, never going to happen, right? So yeah, I don't know. I didn't participate in those stories, but I do know that, one thing that we're following up on is how it has actually impacted school attendance. And then we can get into this debate about, well, was it what Trump said that impacted attendance, or was it all the media flurry around it that impacted attendance? And it's kind of hard to just separate those two things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, very hard. Does anyone else want to talk about that? A lot of the things that the Trump folks have done have been executive orders or dear colleagues. And Mandy, you described it so well. It's been a big challenge for people to figure out how to cover something that may or may not actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with the way that Mandy framed it. I mean, it's just like it's hard to, you have to really be diligent about disentangling the rhetoric from what follows. And I was thinking about that just this week with our coverage of this new Dear Colleague letter about the race-based programs, because that's such an expansive policy guidance from the department. I mean, they're basically telling schools that any kind of program that, even there's just even a hint of conferring benefits on a group based on race is now grounds for an investigation or pulling your funding. I mean, that's kind of an explosive guidance to send, and to say that you have to
Right.
correct this within 14 days. But that kind of cuts against some of what we had heard. I mean, I listened to Craig Trainer say in an internal meeting 2 weeks ago, and we reported this, that, I mean, he met with the OCR team and said, this is just going to be a, anti-Semitism kind of investigation shop from now on. I mean, we want you to prioritize looking at campus protests. We want you to prioritize focusing on that. So if that's what's being said inside versus what's being signaled out to all of these schools with like in just like a limitless constellation of different programs that are now, you just have to think, what is the threat versus like what is actually coming down in action. So
And do you feel like, I mean, in some ways, the Dear Colleague is much more expansive than the elimination of the safe zones, right? It's an assertion demand with time on it. Do you feel like the your coverage or other coverage is a little bit more careful now or different now about assuming the implementation of the letter?
Well, it's tricky for all the reasons that Mandy just spoke to, because it's like, I mean, you don't want to downplay this as, just something that is, just signaling a policy preference or something when we did see them turn around and launch investigations after some of these other things, like immediately after the guidance on transgender athletes in schools. They turn around with several investigations. So it's not the kind of thing where I think you want to be overly cautious right off the bat about maybe this won't really have any effect. But I do think that you have to be mindful about like this is all happening on with the backdrop of them slashing staff and really downsizing, and these investigations take time, or at least they have historically. So it's sort of maybe the guidance and the enforcement action are not gonna completely go hand in hand. It's
Right.
something that you have to just keep an eye on, I think.
Right. And right in between the just to oversimplify, we had the immigration issue, and then we had the layoffs, the DEI layoffs and the probationary layoffs. We've had these different stages. They're so smushed together, it's hard to remember. I was really struck by the fact that in the end, the numbers, at least at the Department of Education, the numbers of layoffs, however fair or unfair that they were. I appreciated it when we finally started to get some numbers out for how many probationary people had been let go, how many DEI, quote unquote, DEI people have been let go. And also, I've been gratified to see questions about the claimed cuts, right? This is all about claim and verification of a claim. And some of you and some others on the beat have been taking hard looks at is that really $900 million in cuts, or is that really $600 million in cuts? These are helpful questions. Lexi, I want to make sure to bring you in here. Is there anything that you've learned along the way, or anything you want to say about what Mandy and Zach have been saying about what they've learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of the same for me in terms of it is hard looking at these stories sometimes and trying to figure out what's going to be real and what's not going to be real, what's kind of just service. I think it's hard, especially going back, let's say, to the ice grades, the claim that there was going to be grades in school, which might happen, but there hasn't been any yet. I think it's hard because on one hand, it is thinking about writing about this. Obviously, none have happened yet. You don't want to stoke more fear, but then, talking to some people who say, attendance is down. This family thought they heard that that schools were just giving kids the ice. And I was like, I haven't seen any news about that. I wonder if that's just like something through the pipeline. Like maybe this is something that needs to be covered more so families know, like, no, schools are not just like giving like kids out and like saying, hey, they don't have like immigration status. So I think it's hard sometimes whenever thinking about, okay, this is what the Trump administration is saying. We don't know if it's going to be real or not, but families and people are talking about this. And like, what is the best way to go about covering this in a way that doesn't inflame the issue and make families think, oh yeah, like all these ice raids that happen, or yeah, the Department of Education is cutting all this stuff right this second, versus like, they need people need somewhere to turn to see, what is actually happening on this issue. So I think that's definitely a hard thing to kind of parse through, especially for me being in like this first in this first round of the Trump administration compared to what we saw with Biden. I feel like there wasn't as much of this, at least for me, trying to guess, where, because it just wasn't so much at once, or so much like, okay, here's what we're thinking, and just trying to figure out well, what's useful here.
That's exactly right. I've got a couple more questions. I want to let those of you who are watching know that if you've got a comment or a question, just put it in the chat and we'll try to get to it. And or if you're watching this recorded as a replay, please continue to ask questions or to make comments, and we'll see if we can get responses from the panelists after the fact. And what I'd like to do now is to ask a couple of questions that everyone doesn't need to answer, but I think will help people understand how you all work and how you all think. Again, not everyone has to answer these. I am a very envious journalist, and I'm always looking at other people's stories and wishing that I'd written that story, or just admiring it. Does anyone have a story that they saw that they really admired that's not that either is or isn't among the panelists who are here? For example, I really appreciated a Vox story about whether there were legitimate concerns about DEI programs and what to make of the desire to oppose DEI cuts versus to rethink or reconsider DEI. So I'm a old-time Vox fan. So that was a story that I really admired and appreciated seeing. Does anyone else have a story that they really liked that they weren't involved in but really liked seeing?
So many, it's hard to even know where to
Okay.
start. I mean, the one that I've been thinking a lot about this week is that big story that the Post did, that some of the data that had been taken from agencies like the education department recently had sort of been fed out into external AI models, like running the data through just through like algorithms that help them analyze it outside the department. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that just sort of seems technical and not like anything outside what you might expect. But in a lot of these lawsuits, that's actually been the basis for a lot of the complaints. Just because when you talk about the Privacy Act, when you talk about student privacy and their data, taking data from inside an agency database and running it outside that invites a lot of legal questions. And that one's just kept coming up over and over, and federal judges have asked, has this happened? And the Justice Department has so far basically not been able to answer. And
that was a great story. I'm glad you mentioned it. It also reminded me of Wired. I don't know if Wired, it feels like these
Wired is
education
amazing.
stories. Yeah, have they done education related stories? Have they been on this as well?
Seems like they've been on all over, but yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've learned has come from stuff that they dug up.
Yeah, we're all gonna have to learn a lot. Does anyone else have a favorite story that they've seen? Lexi, go ahead.
Well, I think I saw the Vox one from one of your tweets or something. I really did like that one. But I think what I like seeing is sometimes with the Department of Education stuff, since I am on kind of all the education issues, sometimes I can't get into some of like the nitty-gritty stuff I wanted to. And I think Zach, it was one of your articles. It was about you did it with someone else, I think. I can't remember their name. It was about uh how the Trump administration, the education department there kind of, push some like DEI programs or initiatives there. And to me that was just interesting because I saw in the first stories and wrote about how the administrative leaves were based off, some were based off a DEI program that happened in Trump administration. And I remember whenever I had to write that I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder like what other like programs or what other stuff was going on in there. And just like, since I cover such a large swath of education, sometimes I can't get into like those little, I don't have the time for that. So I appreciate reading that and like those type of stories that kind of get into the little bit of like the like details there that aren't necessarily like, I guess, super like huge deals for some of the stuff going on right now, but it's an important backdrop to what we're seeing.
Right, pointing out the inconsistency. This is the story that pointed out that people were sent to DEI trainings under DeVos, right? This is that story, right? Zach, that's the one you did with Erica.
That was with Erica, yeah.
Yeah,
One of the
that
best
was
in
a
the
great.
business.
Yes, definitely. That was great in the sense that it had a little bit of a historic element to it and gave people some history. The thing I heard on the radio, I think it was on the media, was pointing out that sometimes this is not an education thing, but Trump criticizes things that sometimes he's criticizing things that were created or expanded during his first administration, but he's hoping that no one remembers. Mandy, did you have one, or should we go on to the next question?
Just a few quick shout outs,
Excellent.
Obviously Jody and Jennifer over at ProPublica, they are just an amazing duo. And so their story on, OCR investigations or lack thereof, it's one of those where you're like, yeah, the data was right there. Like it's a public, database, but of course they have great sourcing within the department. I think Jill, with EdWeek has done some work on the impact of cuts to IES.
Gillette Heckinger.
Heckinger, yep, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, just folks that are grounded in these topics, these content areas, making use of their sourcing and their knowledge to help us, everybody else understand what's going on, I think is really important.
Excellent. Okay, last question, and then we're out. What are you working on today, or without giving away any state secrets, what are you imagining working on next week? Give us a little preview of what you think the next shoe to drop looks like, or where we can look for next education coverage.
Well, I think we're all waiting for McMahon to be officially confirmed, right? And for potentially the executive order to begin the dismantling of the department to come out. So,
Right.
I don't know if there's a chance of this all happening today. I don't particularly love a Friday news dump, but the world has other decisions sometimes.
And then it's a week till the 2 weeks is the 2 weeks that they were given is up a week from today, right?
Lexi's nodding yes.
Yeah.
I believe
Anything
so.
else?
I think it went out last Friday, I believe.
Friday, yeah, it was a happy Valentine's from the Trump Education Department. Is there anything else happening, whether you're going to cover it or not, but happening upcoming that folks should think about or look for in the next week? Not that there hasn't been enough. Maybe we'll just get to figure out what that's been announced is actually going to take effect.
Yeah, I guess what I'm working on and what I'm hoping to be up over the weekend here is kind of before this deadline is up, what it might actually mean. I talked to some folks about they're kind of trying to, in this letter they're talking about expanding the role in the affirmative action role in 2023. And I talked to some folks kind of about like, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like, trying to expand that? What fights we might see over that? What people on the right interpret this expansion to be, and kind of how the Trump administration might try to make policies based on that. So that's what I'm working on kind of before that deadline is up here.
Nice. Well, listen. Oh, Zach, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say, I mean, beyond a week from now, but I think all of us will be forced soon to reckon with what's happening from Congress. We've seen the cuts made just through the department's own identification of programs, and we'll keep seeing this fight over impoundment. But at some point, when it comes to renegotiating Trump's tax cuts and offsetting that with cuts throughout the budget, I think we're really going to have to be laser focused on what educational things fall by the wayside there.
That's fascinating. Yeah, very big and important point in the larger context. I want to thank you all for joining, and I want to thank everyone for watching now or on replay. What you all are doing is really difficult to do, and you're doing it really well. And what a challenging time. And I really appreciate all your reflections on what you've done and how it's gone. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. Bye for now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.